so my skeptical mind, and that's just who I am. My skeptical mind goes to, well, yeah, of course, you've got this guy over here that's logical and reasonable, and you got this guy over here that's wearing a tinfoil hat. Of course, the tinfoil hat guy's gonna see a lot of stuff, right? He's like imagining it, or he's watched one too many sci-fi movies.
But it's used to help us frame hypotheses for UFO propulsion, power, stealth, weaponry.
Everything that we experience is very positive.
Sometimes the field of ufology has a short memory span.
We didn't know anything about the $22 million back then. We just kind of thought, well, this is, and I think that was the reason why they were looking for military-type people, because in the military, you work with whatever you got, no matter what the situation is. You just kind of adapt and overcome.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm from a snowy Salt Lake City. I hope you've had a wonderful week. I know it's been interesting on my end, and as I pull more research from the Angiola files, the discoveries I'm making are simply staggering. I found a very interesting letter from Dr. Hal Puthoff. The one was dated August 17th, 1981. And then I also have a very interesting letter from Russell Targ that dates back into December 28th, 1972. So I'm going to actually read those when we come back from our break, because again, all of these correspondents are so insightful. And again, these are people that I have information on that have been in this subject for so long, for better or for worse, but I am definitely making interesting connections that I share with you. And if you help support the show, each week you'll be getting insider information, documents that no one else has seen from the Angiola files. You can go to UFOclassified.com. Help support the show and get access to this information. So, on that note, I want to give a big shout out to all of my friends in chat. I want to thank Irv and everyone that listens faithfully every week, and Hoska and Mario, and all of you. You make this show worthwhile, and you are the reason that I keep going. So thank you for your love and support. Tonight I'm here with two of my favorite troublemakers next to Phil Leach. And Tony and Ben, we met each other way back when at a UFO conference, a Mufon symposium, and it was just, it was trouble from there on out. So they have been on my show several times over the years. I have just a great time with them. They've worked very, very hard at what they have done. Here is a little bit about them. Ben Moss is a UFO investigator, researcher, and author of Not of This World, the 1964 Socorro UFO landing with humanoids. He is the former Mufon chief field investigator and has appeared on numerous radio and TV shows like Hangar 1, NASA's Unexplained Files, one of the most recent episodes of Ben Hansen's UFO Witness as well. He continues to investigate cases and hopes to catch his own undisputed data of anomalous aerial vehicles. Yep. I'm here. Yeah, baby. I'm here with Tony, and of course the two travel in pair. So we know this. But Tony began his UFO research early in the 90s. He served as an investigator and assistant state director for Mufon, Virginia. In 2019, he worked with Ben, starting their own research under TUFOG, the UFO guys, along with Norm Gagnon, and a host of friends in the field that share the same passion for the field of ufology and hard work. Tony and Ben spent 4 years of research into the Socorro, New Mexico case of Lonnie Zamora, and 2 visits to this site. They uncovered additional information, witness testimony. They worked with Ray Stanford on this wonderful book that has just come out, Not of This World. He's a computer network engineer for over 30 years and still works in the field. He has been on the History Channel Hangar 1 and NASA's Unexplained Files. And so, as always, boys, are you staying out of trouble?
Sure. These days, can't get into any trouble.
That is a really good point. Are you like me? Are you guys just kind of bored?
Yeah, iced in right now.
Ben's bored. I'm never bored.
Well, what's your secret?
I play guitar.
Good point. Okay, cool. You do. Absolutely. And so what? I know that obviously we've been living through the zombie apocalypse, and it's been a very interesting time over the past year. How has everything affected you guys?
Well, for me, I learned that I really don't look good with long hair.
You've got long hair now?
It's more like a fro.
Oh, sweet mama baby.
I don't know. I don't like it. It's growing too long in the wrong places.
That sounds like an accident waiting to happen. Can you send me photos?
I have a nice collection of beanies I wear out the door.
Street thug. What's up?
Oh my god! You know what I look like when I go into Costco? I got a mask on for one, then I got a hoodie on, and underneath that I got a beanie on, and then I wear like Ray-Ban sunglasses. So I must have a gun on me. You know?
Well, are you dating at all? Is the question.
Oh, is that the question? Yes.
Is that in person? Just kidding.
Have gun will date.
You've gone on a whole date?
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. Oh, Lord. Well, anyway, it's nice to have you guys back. I think the last time you were on our show, we had a guest who, and things got kind of a little rowdy, but we won't go into details on that. But, you know, you guys have been, again, like I mentioned in the introduction, you guys have been doing this for a long time, and it's been interesting because I think all of us have gone through certain realizations about Mufon and about some of the people involved in the subject, and we've, raised, the alarm bells. And I want to ask you, just to get this out of the way, and then we can start talking about the book and Ray Sanford and Socorro and all this stuff. But I want to ask you what your thoughts are first on the executive director and what happened with that, the former executive director.
Well, it was a sad and tragic unfolding of events. I knew Jan. Everybody that knew Jan, pretty much, didn't see any kind of signs of anything wrong. So I was just shocked. It's unfortunate. It's a horrible thing, and that's all. It's like what you see on TV when they say, "Look, I live next to the guy. He was a nice guy. I can't believe he did this." It's just like that. I couldn't believe it, and it was just a shame for Mufon at the time. But on top of that, one thing I'll say is when Tony and I met you at the Cherry Hill, New Jersey Mufon conference in 2014, I think, that's when we met Paul Billadod and started working on Hangar 1, and also when we saw James Fox's clip that got us interested in Socorro. So all those things came out of that one conference.
It was so much fun.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, it was just, I remember meeting so many, people, and you two are at the top of my list, and I always follow what you do, and I keep track of everything because we had a great time, and I've always really, enjoyed where you've gone and what you're doing, and the fact that you have worked so hard on things. I mean, you like I said, you went to Socorro twice, and you've interviewed plenty of witnesses, and you've spent a considerable amount of time visiting Ray, which I think is so important. And a lot of people that investigate cases and things just sit behind a computer and they're not out there. And as we all know, getting to certain places and conducting an investigation or interviewing people, it comes out of our own pockets. We're not getting funded to do this.
Oh, yeah.
That's a really good point.
Time for the money.
It's I can't tell you how many times people have come up to us and said, "Hey, I want to send you my resume." Like, what? A resume? You think I'm going to pay you to do this? And then other people would ask, "So how much do you make doing this?" Just right. They don't even hold back, and then they're shocked when I tell them it's the other way around. I have to make a budget so that I can do this.
Yeah, it gets pretty expensive. When I filmed for Ben Hansen's UFO Witness in Socorro, it was in April, and the virus had just hit, and I was pretty sure it wasn't going to be in New Mexico yet. But when I got that, they paid for my flight, but I spent $1,000 to upgrade to first class so I could sit by myself and not be around anybody, and it paid off. I never caught it. I don't think it was that deep in the country yet, but. Yeah, scary times.
You know, it is, and it has been interesting with regard to, you know, filming schedules and things, and I've only done one production since the virus hit, which hasn't aired yet. That should be coming out pretty quick, which should be, you know, I think a bombshell to say the least, but more details when I get the go ahead on that. But it has put a crimp in that, and I wonder when I see other shows that are in full swing and that are in production, and they're sitting there side by side high-fiving each other and nobody's wearing a mask. I just think, well, good luck to you. Hope you're getting paid enough, and I hope you signed a good enough waiver.
Oh,
yeah. I had a call from a UK company to do a show about Roswell, and they halted everything. We were gonna meet in DC to film, and they just said they can't do anything because the protocols aren't good enough to make sure everybody's safe. So it is weird. You know, it's like a woman at the grocery store said that works there. Right when this thing was getting bad, she goes, "We're all living in a science fiction movie," and I was like, "That's a perfect way to say it, because that's what's going on right now."
Well, and isn't that interesting? Obviously, I've had a lot more time to sit here and watch videos, and you go back to these, you know, pandemic, and you go back to these, you know, zombie apocalypse videos, and it's just like, this is really weird. Because so many of them it's almost like they're foreshadowing what was to come, and it's just strange. But I hope we can get, you know, back to normal, or back to what is the new normal relatively soon, because I miss hanging out with you, traveling and visiting people like my friend and ICAP and different things, because there's such a wealth of information out there, and there's so many people in age like Ray is, that if we don't, you know, we have to reach out to them and make sure we're recording our interactions with them, because it will be lost forever. So I really think that's cool. You guys have done that with Ray.
Yeah, it's been a challenge, because Ray, I think he told me he's scheduled to get a shot next week, but I think once we get vaccinated, it's going to be a little bit back to normal. But this is my own opinion. I think almost everybody's going to get infected at one time or another. There's so many variations. I think if you get the shot, you won't die or go to the hospital. But people will slack off after they've gotten both doses. The numbers will go down, and some new variant will come around that might make you feel like you have a cold. But I think the only way we're really going to get to herd immunity is if about 90% of the population becomes infected, which could happen. You know, you just don't know.
Yeah, I know. It'll be interesting to see how it rolls out. And I have to ask you, because I've been trying to address this a little bit on every show. For me, I've seen a really kind of a disturbing trend in the UFO quote-unquote community, where we have a lot of conspiracy and a lot of things that are being woven into things. And then, you know, as a result, we see some things that aren't necessarily in the subject's best interest or in our own best interest. And so how do you feel when you've seen some of the things that are taking place, specifically with regard to people on the Mufon board who have actually out they were there in Washington, D.C. for the insurrection? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I hate to put you on the spot, but to me, this is really important.
I didn't know about that.
I didn't. Yeah, neither one of us knew there were MUFON people at the insurrection. That's the first I've heard of it.
Yeah. It was Tom Whitmore who's on the board of directors, and so.
Right, posted pictures. I guess we're friends on Facebook. I saw the pictures, but I forgot that he was with MUFON.
Yeah, isn't he the guy that we saw also in Texas?
I think so.
Yeah, I remember seeing him there twice.
Yeah, that's just, you know, when you get into these political things, I mean, if you were there at the insurrection breaking into the Capitol building, well, then you should go to prison. It's just a shame. I just can't believe anybody would actually do that. And that, I don't want to get into a political thing, but man, there's a better way to resolve differences than that.
Right, absolutely. And I try to, like I said, I bring this up every week because to me it's so important, because we have a chance to make this a better field and to really get down to business. And I think that this has been very harmful in a lot of regards because we're continually dealing with the racism and, you know, this kind of, this kind of militia-like mentality, and we distrust the government, and of course we all have questions about things, but we don't. I certainly wouldn't be gloating about standing next to the Proud Boys, but that's my own personal opinion. And I also think, like we have talked about before on the show, that specific organizations should abide by certain standards, and I know that you both agree with me in that regard.
Absolutely. In fact, I wish that there was. In terms of background checks, before you let people assign themselves titles, for example,
right? Like
perhaps, right, and you're with a big organization, that's supposed to be reputable and has been around for a long time. You would think that they would do some sort of background check to make sure that what this person is promoting themselves as is actually true, and didn't falsify, like say something like, I don't know, like a resume.
Like, with Philip Mantel uncovered these documents that showed that Nick Pope really didn't do any of the things that he said he did for the Department of Defense in the UK. He was just kind of a phone jockey. And even Kevin Randall looked a little deeper, and the documents clearly state he took a couple of phone calls. If it was about UFOs, he had to send them to somebody else. So it just sounds like his entire resume is a fiction of his watching too much X-Files.
I mean, and it is interesting. And I mean, you hear so many things. And I've personally, I worked on a show with Nick, and I had a great time with him. But I know that there have been raised a red flag about some things, and I think that there are. That goes back to my point that the subject, because there are no, it's just the Wild West. And so people can get in here and they can make up their resume and say that they worked for the DOD on some secret, project, when yet, in fact, they were, teaching kindergartners how to do aerobics, things like that. And so it's so important for us to do our homework, to not accept things at face value, and to, especially when somebody's been in the field for a long, long time in a public way, you've got to ask questions. Are they going to, go up and die on a hill because of a case, or are they willing to look at things that are coming in that might change that case and what they initially found out about research? And so, I mean, I just think, and I want to ask you guys about that with Socorro, because there have been, you've done a lot of work, and there have been questions that come into play about that case and how things might have changed or new information would come to light. I know that for me, my work and what I thought about specific things has definitely done a 360 in the past year, especially. But I mean, how does that affect you, and how have you guys changed from when you initially came into the field from where you are now?
That's a good one. I remember starting out and feeling like it was just overwhelming, just learning that computer system that Mufon had, the CMS, and then I thought, man, this is like being a cop, having to write up paperwork for like all kinds of little things, because a lot of the cases that were coming in were easily written off, so you might have like a dozen cases that you can explain, and you had to document all this stuff in the system. And I'm like, man, I'm spending more time on the system than I'm doing investigating.
Yeah, as we've gone along, you learn a lot in the business. You chase a lot of bogus stuff, and there's a lot more of it out there now, and a lot of misidentification. And it got to the point where it was just better to do our own investigating. And, there's a lot of, it's funny because UFOs are real popular now, but it's on paranormal shows and ghost shows and things that really don't have anything to do with UFOs. And it gets to a point where, everybody's a self-described expert, and they're all saying ridiculous things on TV. And, people start believing that stuff, just like the myth of disclosure. That's coming around again. It was supposedly in the bill that's going to pass that they had to disclose in 180 days. And it's just like, come on, man. You're going to fall for that again? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
Absolutely. And that's just, it's funny to me. I mean, I know that we all, like when I got into this, publicly, it was like, you saw me because you were there, and at the Mufon symposiums and things. And I was so gung-ho and rah-rah, let's do this. And I love everybody. Let's do this together. And then it was like, okay, wait a minute, just kidding. Nope, not going to happen. So, which is unfortunate because I always want to think the best of people, and I want to think that we're doing this for the right reasons and to truly find out what we're dealing with. And unfortunately, there's so many little things that hold you down or attempt to hold you down, like people's personality problems and mental issues or jealousy or different things that you just think, oh my Lord, have mercy. And I get it. I guess it's kind of like it's a place for people to go, and so you're going to have these conflicts, I guess, but you just think, oh my Lord, have mercy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the field is challenging enough as it is. You're constantly labeled as a nut just for even talking about it. Fortunately, there's more stuff coming in the news that lends at least some credibility to the field from the staunch non-believers, I guess. But to have people in the field constantly let us down the way we've been seeing as of the past couple of years is really hard,
Yeah, when a big red flag is when people are trying to chase the dollar as UFO personalities, and that's just a big warning to me that there's a lot of people being reactive to things that are happening, but how many people are investigating and researching? I mean, you've got those great documents that have all kinds of great information that you can share. Just like, when we did this investigation, we had to go on site, the debunkers and people that didn't believe Socorro was anything but maybe a balloon had never been to the site, had never, seen the terrain and seen how impossible that would be. And so, you've got more these days personalities and reactors and not investigators as much. I mean, there's still a lot of good investigators out there. There's a lot of good people doing good work. But the field is flooded with a lot of bad information.
It is. I mean, it's sad. And I think a lot of that, some of that is on purpose, just to confuse the subject. And then you've got people that are just dimwits that clearly can't get dates, and I don't even know, whatever, living in mama's basement.
God, hate in your heart, let it out.
But it is interesting, and I like I've been saying, I said on last week's show, it's like I'm so grateful I've had these experiences, and they've been hard and they've been fun and stupefying at times, but it's like it's just broadened my horizon on so many different levels. And I've also learned a little bit more about the way the government works, communities, and different things, and that's been a trip as well. And so with you guys, I want to kind of go back to the beginning because some of my listeners have not listened to our previous shows. And so I want to ask each of you, and I'm going to ask Ben first, how you first got involved, how and why you first got involved in this.
Well, I was with my dad, and we watching this little tiny TV. He was a doctor, and a patient had given him this little tiny TV, and we were sitting on his bed, and I wasn't very old, but the Walter Cronkite special about UFOs came on, and I was just hooked from that point forward. And that was, gosh, I don't know when that aired, but it shows how old I am, probably in the 60s, I guess. But that's what did it for me. And then I started, I was a big comic book collector, but at the same time, these UFO magazines would pop up at the comic book store, and I'd grab every one of them. And then I went to the library and found the Adamski books that I ate those up. Photos. It was one of the few books that had photos, and I got hooked on it. And it was just from that point forward, I wanted to find out if there was anything going on.
And when did you first get involved in Mufon? How did you find Mufon, and what took place to when you started to get active?
I joined MUFON in the 90s and was kind of, cases weren't that many, I don't think, and we had a lot more investigators, so I didn't get a whole lot of cases. I got a lot more cases later, but I remember I got more involved. I was the security for the '99 Crystal City Mufon Symposium, and then in kind of middle 2011 or so, our state director Sue Switek I started hearing about meetings, and then I started doing more investigations, and then got promoted to chief field investigator, and then met Tony, and found out he was already with them, and so that's how that got going.
And it's always interesting to hear people's backgrounds. And so, Tony, why are you still doing this after all these years? Why did you get involved?
It was my computer teacher out of high school back in the late '80s who gave me a book on the Billy Meyer case, and like kind of like what Ben was saying about Damsky, there were pictures and stuff in there, and at the time I didn't know any better. I was getting all into it and stuff, and fast forward into the '90s when I got involved with MUFON, I used to eat up those monthly journals. They had a lot of great articles.
Oh yeah,
back in those days, and I used to eat those things. I still have them. I collected all of them, put them in plastic. Then fast forward again into the 2000s, and I started a family, so I kind of got out of it for a little bit. Then, it's like every 10 years you live another life, it seems like. Then I ran into Ben in a business meeting, and we got on the subject, and he got me, back into MUFON, and I was, involved as assistant state director. And then we started doing a lot of cool adventures together, and here we are.
You guys have been such good friends. Yeah, ever since. It's cool to see how strong your friendship has been, and where, all the directions that you've traveled and things. And, like I mentioned, I mean, it's like all of our opinions, we've been through so much, and all of our opinions of, we've changed a bit over the years and learned some hard facts, unfortunately, but what, with MUFON Virginia, what were some of the strengths and the weaknesses of that specific chapter?
Well, it was, there were, how can I put this? I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but there was just
lack of coordination, perhaps? Yeah,
there was a little bit of lack of coordination. There were some cases that were kind of cherry-picked out and didn't seem to be worked. And it was just, there were good times. There were certainly good times when things were rolling and times when it wasn't. There was always a scramble for equipment. But I don't know. We were having problems with the CMS system also. It just, we tried, it's really hard, and I've learned this from other groups, it's really hard to get a group that meets every 2 months. I think it was 3 or 4 times a year, maybe more than that. But it's really hard for people to show up and to get the place. We got kicked out of about 3 or 4 different restaurants that we would meet in because they just didn't want us in there for some reason or another. So,
maybe we occupy too much time and not spend enough money.
Yeah, that could be
true. That's more than likely.
Probably was it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is funny. And so how big was your chapter?
I think at the largest point, we had one really big full room. We had at least, 35 people.
Well, we had Colonel Halt there, Charles Halt. That was a big one.
That's a huge crowd draw.
And when we did a presentation at the Maryland chapter, I can't remember the guy's name. Ted Buffington. Real nice guy, scientist from JPL. But
really cool.
That was a big crowd there. And when Teresa Tyndall was doing Maryland, I heard she was doing a real good job of organizing people and getting good crowds. But it's just tough. And now with COVID, the thing I was going to say is I really do miss traveling and seeing everybody. I talked to Jeremy Ray yesterday.
Right.
Cool.
Everybody I wanted to fly out to Vegas to the MUFON Symposium just to see the people. I'm not that much interested in the speakers, but I like the people that come to these things and seeing Chris O'Brien and a lot of and you guys. And it's just, I miss that so much. I can't wait till we get back to some kind of normalcy like
People are predicting an explosion of entertainment as soon as all this is over.
Oh, yeah, it'll be party time.
Yeah, people are going to go nuts.
Well, and now I can't wait. It'll be so nice just to see everybody. And I think the one thing that COVID and going through all of this has probably taught all of us is to appreciate the moments that we spend, with our friends and family more.
And it helps you realize times in the past.
Yeah. It's the old adage, you don't know what you got till it's gone.
Right.
And now we know what we're missing, just a simple thing.
I'm so happy I got in a lot of scuba dives and a lot of great vacations. I'm looking back on those now because I'm thinking I wouldn't dare get on an airplane right now.
It would be a little sketchy, but when I learned that I was getting the Andruffel files, we had to get on an airplane, and then during, and this was kind of when it first ramped up and things, and then we had to visit, we were right by Gordon, so we went to visit him and check in on him and things, but we were incredibly careful and had N95s and different things. But it is, I think, like you mentioned, people are getting a little bit more lax in it because we're all tired of it, but I think now's the time to kind of keep on top of that, because I want to get back to business as usual, and I want to see you guys and hang out and cause trouble.
Yeah, I miss the camaraderie between people, and you forget who you're not seeing until you actually go back to an event again and go, oh yeah, how have you been? Because there's so many people you lose touch with during once in a lifetime pandemics.
And I want to mention that today is the 3-year anniversary of the passing of Craig Lange, who we all knew. And so Craig Lange was with Mufon and worked on the Experiencer research team, and he was a dear friend of mine. I loved Craig, and I know you felt the same way, and so that was a shock. He was at UFO Congress 3 years ago, and he became ill and then ended up going and unfortunately passing away by himself. I'm not quite sure why somebody from the conference didn't go and keep track of him, but they didn't. So I just wanted to, give everybody in his chapter and Mitzi just a big love, because Craig was an incredible person, and that was such a loss for all of us.
He was a really nice guy, man. I really liked that guy. I was shocked to hear that. That was such a shame.
That what it was. I'll never forget, where I was when I heard that, and it really, I think, took a while, and it was fortunate enough to be asked to speak at the Mufon chapter on Craig, just to talk about my relationship with Craig, and I could not make it through that one, for sure, because it was just a very big loss. And I think you should be able to still find that online, and you can, see that and remember Craig and his cause of death. I mean, he died from an infection, and there were lots of questions around his cause of death and things. So it was interesting, but nonetheless, we lost a friend, and so I just want to just remember him for a moment. So what were your before we get into some of the other stuff like your cool cases and Socorro, what were some of just a memory that you had of Craig?
I think our last song was at the conference in Florida.
Yeah. At
the bar, and we were hanging out there late at night because we're always out late.
No.
Yeah,
that was the last time I saw him. Yeah.
I just remember him laughing and smiling a lot, and he was very gregarious, and that was my last memory of him, was just how friendly he was.
I remember he could just look right through your eyes, like he's very intense.
Yeah.
When you talk to him.
He was, and I wanted to say that just made me smile, because I remember when I was first at the Mufon Symposium, in Cherry Hill, I was there by myself, and being a woman, I had people like him, and then both of you, who kind of, we all bonded pretty quickly, and I could tell that all of you were protective of me. And being a woman in a male-dominated field with, some nutty people, I really appreciated having that camaraderie and having all of you keep track of me and make sure that I was okay and different things, because there were other people in the organization that I had reached out to when I was having a specific problem that I addressed on last week's show at great length. I mean, some people didn't step up to that, and I appreciate what all of you did to help me.
I'll tell you what, it's hard being a woman, and I'm so glad I am not one, because I think it's 3 times harder to be a woman, I think, than a guy, because you got to constantly, especially if you're good looking, there's always a guy out there with his eyes on you, and you don't know.
Well, you find out who some of the jerks are with situations like that. It's just a shame that we're still in a society where we have this disparity about the way people are treated, especially women. It's just ridiculous.
It is. And I had one experience that I was at a conference with certain people that have a different chapter and things. And there's a picture of me because I'm, Pilates instructor, and my arms were behind my head, and I was wearing a tank top. It's like, okay, great. I'm in a tank top. And this person pulled me aside and just said, oh, you just can't. You cannot have a picture of you like that out there. That gives people the wrong idea. Yeah, were you?
I remember that one. Ben, look, you're looking like this. I'm doing your pose.
In fact, my pose is on. If you're in Spreaker, you can see that. That's the pose, and so it was like, and that was a scandalous thing, and I should have known better. And I just thought, really?
I thought that was a great picture.
Well, thank you. I was quite proud of myself because I was working out a lot, and I mean, why should you be ashamed to wear a tank top and have your hands behind your head? I don't know. It's just crazy. But then again, it goes to show kind of that mindset of people that us moving forward, and specifically engaging more women in the subject and being treated with respect, I think. So, and that's a big one. But I want to ask you, because this just has come to my mind, in your specific chapter or in other chapters of Mufon, did you find that there were people that were promoting things, whether they were religious or political, that perhaps made kind of marginalized the subject?
There were quite a few. Yeah, there were quite a few people that were religious, and I remember a couple times that when we spoke over in Maryland at the Mysteries of Space and Sky.
Right.
Some of these people they were from Maryland, some were from Virginia, and they had this weird religious angle towards their, I guess, belief in ufology. And so one of them was a lady that was crying on my shoulder that I sent over to you.
Right.
That one. And she kept tying in religion with her alleged abduction experience, I guess. And so, I don't know what to say to those people, and I try not to, be some kind of, agnostic atheist that says there's no religion or anything like this. So to each his own. But I would wish that people wouldn't do that, assuming that what if I'm not a Christian, or what if I'm not Buddhist, or what if I'm not their religion and they're trying to identify with me? I don't want to insult them about it. So
yeah, in our chapter there weren't. The people you meet at conferences can be very different. But in our chapter, in Virginia, we had excellent investigators. We had Victor Rodriguez, who used to be captain of a base. We had Norm Gagnon. We had Diana, and what's the other gentleman's name? Yeah, I'm sorry.
He's in Florida?
No, that lives here in Virginia. But we have really good investigators that did really good jobs on cases. And, Norm designed the cover for the book we wrote, and he's always posting stuff he used to do props for movies and
Norm's
stuff.
amazing. He did a prop for us. He made us a diorama.
He made a diorama of the Socorro UFO using dirt that we brought back from Socorro.
Yeah.
Dang, and I have to say, I like Norm a lot. I've been trying to get him back on the show, and he's a cool, bright, funny guy who did a lot of work. And he was one of the first investigators that investigated the Chris Bledsoe case. Yep. And tell me a little bit about what you know about the Bledsoe case, because this is, one that if you're in the UFO world, you're always hearing about Chris Bledsoe and different things. And so give me the details.
I don't know too much about it. We met Chris in North Carolina. I think we all had dinner together and all this. And Norm, I think, was with us. Yeah, Norm was there. And Norm,
we all drove together.
Yeah, all drove together. I started piecing my mouth together at the last second. And I was like, hold on. It's all starting to come back to me. And Norm, we all rode down together. But Norm knows him very well because he worked very closely with Chris about it, and he was talking to us about the case on the way down, saying these amazing experiences that Chris had with his sons up on this mountain, and at missing time, and up to the point when we met him during this dinner, he was telling us a story about how in his backyard, almost on any given night, he could photograph these weird things in his backyard. And he was showing us these pictures of what looked like orbs and maybe faces in the orbs, which was really...
One guy's dog had just died, and there was a dog face.
Right.
It was really, I mean...
It was almost as if his camera was like a spirit camera or something.
Yeah.
And it was capturing, like, you know, these spirits and these spheres or something. It was...
So Chris is I believe that he's having these experiences because he had that real famous one with the entities, and there's some weird stuff going on definitely around him, maybe not that particular spot, but a lot of the photos we saw were just fascinating, and it's not just a trick of the camera. There's a lot of detail in a lot of them, and they're witnessed by 10, 20 people that come to his house to see these things. And so we were always wanted to follow up on that, but he's been real busy lately, and then the pandemic hit, and that's just another thing that we wanted to get to that we can't.
Yeah, he invited us to come down there and camp out, and I don't know, I kind of feel a little uneasy about camping out for two reasons. I like a hotel, number one.
Well, you can't go camping with me then.
I like camping.
I love camping. It's funny because I've just got to throw this in there. Nick Redfern and I are good friends and stuff, and he's come to visit a few times, and I visit him, but I would keep threatening him, like, Nick, I'm taking you camping, and he's just like, no, you're not. So maybe you and Nick could have
Nick and I can camp in the hotel.
The whole key to camping is being off the ground. So you have a big air mattress, you blow that up with a nice tent, and you're fine, as long as a bear or Sasquatch doesn't get you.
Well, oh my gosh, last summer we went camping up by Skinwalker Ranch, and we woke up the next morning and we found bear tracks and all sorts of different tracks that were snooping around our campsite and things, and it was just like, what? Mountain lion. It was just like, okay. And I could hear things in the middle of the night. I'm just sitting there going, Hail Mary, okay, whatever.
Eric, what's the coldest that you've ever camped in?
What?
What's the coldest temperature that you've camped in?
Probably about 35 degrees.
What was the temperature here this weekend? Was it like 16, 24 at night?
15 or so.
I got a couple buddies went camping this weekend.
Oh.
They almost froze themselves to death. Icicles everywhere, and their feet were numb. I was like, forget about that, man. I'm not doing it.
I love camping, and I think just being in Utah and stuff, we've got so much beautiful space out here, and I love it, and I love roughing it. And a few years ago, I was speaking at UFO Congress, and Ted Rowe was speaking with me, and we decided to go out to, and I'm sure I told you guys this, but we went out to this site where there have been lots of reports of different types of things, and people like Michael Persinger and Erling Strand and Massimo Teodoranti, they'd all visited this location, which everybody's agreed to keep out of the the public spotlight for multiple reasons. But we were out there, and it was quite cold, and we literally, and I don't know what possessed us, but we slept without a tent. Oh. And this was, for 5 days, and it was, there were, coyotes running through the...
No way.
It was just like, really? But that's just me. I love doing that kind of stuff.
I bet everybody got a little stinky, though.
But you know what? I'm one with that. It's like, not taking a bath for 5 days, great, sign me up. Not wearing makeup and, flitting around in my Doors t-shirt and just being, I love doing that. Of course, I'm, glad that there weren't any pictures that were released from.
I bet.
The last time I camped, it was with my first wife's family, big campers. We were up in West Virginia, and there was they said there was a shower. We were on this property; they had permission, and there was a shower. I'm like, great, because it was about 30 degrees. and I go to the shower, and all it is this spigot with cold water coming out. The water was like 40 degrees, and there's nothing like taking a ice cold shower in 30-degree weather and trying to keep yourself warm. I'll never forget that because it was. I'm glad I didn't have a stroke or a heart attack.
I'll tell you what, I have friends that are former Marines and also my bicycle buddies, and they all, call me a prima donna because I just don't like roughing it whatsoever. I learned at an early age in Boy Scouts. I had every camping experience was a nightmare, and I swore I would never do it again.
Ben, what do you think? Should we invite Tony and Nick out to Utah for a little camping?
Sure, get Jeremy over there also. He's close.
Man, wouldn't happen.
It would be an adventure.
Whatever.
We'll just run a van and sleep in a van.
I might do a camper if it's got a shower in it. I can't do more than a day without a shower, man. Maybe 2, but golly.
Well, we'll see about that. In fact, I'm putting that on my list. So there you go.
I'm so picky about my mattress too, man. I love my purple number 4.
Purple number 4. Oh, okay. I'm going to move right along from that. But, okay, so let's get back to, when you were in Mufon, what was your favorite case that you investigated?
Wow.
The dogs?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely the dogs. That's my favorite case. Yeah. What happened was that, we don't mind spending money to do a great case, as you can see from Socorro. But before that, there was a case we were really excited about from a former Air Force K-9 intelligence officer. Yeah. She worked with dogs, and she had a lot of them. And a lot of these security dogs that were retired German Shepherd killers, just these dogs were, if she commanded them to, they would have killed us in a heartbeat. I mean, there was this flimsy fence holding them back. And I asked her if we were okay. And she goes, something like, as long as the fence holds or something. And I think I turned to you and said, we got to run, last guy to the car is out of luck or something. But see, I know how Ben is with dogs, and I know he was going to try to pet one. Well, I walked close, and they were frothing at the mouth, and there was this alpha, like wolf-like creature in there. And so the whole investigation, these dogs never stopped. The entire investigation. The one dog that wanted to kill Ben was chewing the chicken wire. Oh yeah, he was yanking on the wire, and I kept, it was really unnerving. And then the guns went off at the nearby fort. We were Fort Hood or something. Yeah, Fort Meade. Was it Meade? Yeah. It was a ways away, but she had said she had seen these orbs and these things like that, and so we sat out there. We actually brought a little whiskey. We brought a drone. We flew the drone up to the trees. She said this UFO had touched the trees, and we flew the drone up to see if there was any dead, material up there. And we did a lot of filming and stuff like this, and then the whiskey was hilarious. Well, I brought some whiskey, because it was cold. It was like 25, I think, and we weren't dressed properly at all. We're sitting in these lounge chairs. Tony's got Flight Trader on his phone to track objects. Tells you what's flying overhead. And sure enough, everything she thought was a UFO was like, no, that's a DC to Dallas Flight 768, and then we saw, I think, either a satellite or the space shuttle go over once, and she thought that was a UFO. And she had me extend my arm out, and she said that the ball of light was at my fingertips. And she was going, can you see it? Can you see it? And I was like, no, there's nothing there, But the interesting thing was, and it's on our UFO guys on Facebook, was we took these pictures, or I took these pictures of my car, and can't remember why I did that. But in 2 pictures, and it doesn't look like sun refraction, there's these 2 balls with kind of a star inside of them, and they're orange. And I remember Bruce Maccabee looked at him, and I was saying, is this just a refraction of light? And he's like, yeah, I don't think so. It doesn't look like the sun is in that area. So it's weird that we were kind of not seeing what she was seeing, but later on when I looked at these pictures, We saw what she was describing.
The things she described were just like what we photographed, these translucent orbs with like a star inside of it.
And we sent her the pictures, and she said that that's what it was.
Yeah. So who knows? Sometimes the case can go in all these different directions. But
one thing she said, that she saw a 3-foot-tall creature with a large head by her mailbox.
That's right.
And then it scurried across her driveway and hid behind a tree. Remember that?
Yeah. She lived in an area that was an old. It still was kind of unexplored from the Confederate War. There were some skirmishes near there, and we always wanted to go back and metal detect because she gave us permission. But that was an interesting case because of the threat of death from the dogs. Trying to figure out what she was actually seeing, and then actually having a little bit of evidence of maybe something going on there.
Right. What's really funny is that at one point Ben was recording with his phone, and he didn't know that I was talking to the witness about maybe 10 feet back, and we were talking about ghosts, and I said with a really deep voice, "Get out," and it picked up on Ben's microphone, and later when he listened to it back, he thought it was an EVP.
Thought I had a ghost.
Well.
Oh man, that was funny.
You have to have a little bit of humor in all this, right?
Yeah, on a different subject, on a different interview probably, we could talk about the ghost investigation we did at my house in Pennsylvania.
I remember you telling me about that, and that was so fascinating, and who knows, we might be able to talk about it tonight, because we go in lots of different directions, because there's so many interesting things to talk about. But thank you for talking about that. And I want to ask you, because we've got Phil in chat, and for those of you who have not listened to a show with Phil Leach, I would highly recommend you going back to the UFO Classified archives on my website, ufoclassified.com, or on YouTube, and listen to Phil talk about some of the things with Mufon that he has helped to expose. And so he wanted to ask you, before we go to break, what are some of, do you see that there is some way to save Mufon? What would that be if it is, or should Mufon just be, should we move away from an organization like Mufon?
There's so many organizations before Mufon, as you know, and even the one that Ray was with,
Starlight.
That one.
APRO. Oh, NICAP. He was
NICAP. Or NICAP, right? NICAP. And they got infiltrated. CIA. Did whatever they had to do to make sure that it was defunded, more or less. And then with MUFON, you have, as of late, what seems to be corruption at the top, And in my opinion, in order to save the organization, it's about integrity and background checks and making sure that there are rules in place, to prevent this from happening again.
I think there's a lot of great investigators with MUFON. Our Phoenix friends do a good job. Our Florida friends, our Colorado friends. So, there's a lot of good people out there. It just needs. I don't know what happens with the money, but if they maybe gotten some instruments to some of the places where things were happening and supported the field investigators a little bit more. It's just one of those things where there's a lot of potential there, and I wouldn't want to see them go away or anything. I just think you need to tighten the reins, make sure you know who's in charge and what they're doing, and stay on the scientific path. Don't stray into the ancient alien type scenario where you're off the rails, and try to. MUFON should be about getting scientific evidence to present to the public. That's
kind of what they've hidden behind for a long time, I suppose.
Well, it's one thing to say it, but it's another to do it.
Obviously. Well, and what do you think, we've got just a couple more minutes before break, but I want to just ask you, what do you think about the fact, one thing that's been very concerning to a lot of us is the fact that the data, you could buy it and sell it to the highest bidder. And you never know at the end of the day what is happening with this personal information. I mean, what are your thoughts?
You mean like when they had to deal with Bigelow, or
Bigelow, and then the John Carpenter ordeal and things like that.
Yeah, it seems like these organizations, they get desperate for money, and they literally sell their souls to get it, you know? And it never seems to go well. So, in my opinion, I would stay away from it, you know? Stick to your guns, your integrity, and don't fall for the billionaire, you know, fiasco for money for data, because it just never works out.
Well, I think with Bigelow, there was probably good intent there, but I don't think they negotiated the proper contract. You know, I really don't think I think it was, you know, to fund the company, but yeah, giving up metamaterials and things and top cases to one organization that works for defense intelligence is probably not a good way to ever let the public know what's going on.
And you know, for all we know, Bigelow could be working for the government and just
he does.
And just giving the technology. So basically, you know, we exist. The government doesn't have to do anything anymore, right? They don't have to steal it. We're going to give it to them. You know, at that point,
that's the problem.
If they're willing to pay for it and we're willing to give it, then what is the point? We're not even investigating anymore.
Yeah, look at you know, it's once again, it's like the collapse of to the Bank Academy and that
to the Bank Academy.
That's what I always.
Yeah, so
but
true.
You know, you cannot. You have to come into ufology with the right sort of attitude and not be looking to make a quick buck. You know, you have to definitely do the work. And you know, we've lost recently so many good people that did good work. Stanton and, you know, Clifford died, and gosh, a couple of other people that it's getting to the point where these guys from the old days that did do a lot of good research are passing away. And one of the things that we got to watch out for is to make sure their data survives and their research survives.
And that's the difficult thing. I mean, I've been, you know, how important that has been to me to make sure that information is not only going to be archived, protected, and moved forward to other people, but that I'm also, you know, I mean, every week I'm trying to share bits of information about that and giving it to people, because I really, and I've seen this firsthand, there is a concerted effort of people with money coming from who knows where, that are traveling all over and just sweeping it up. And, you know, I mean, we can say that you've got, you know, hey, here's this person over here who's, you know, oh, I've got all this stuff and I'm putting it out. But what about the stuff that is not being put out? You know, you can put out a bunch of periodicals and all of this stuff, but what about the research that people like Ann Druffel have done for decades? That is the key. Getting files like that and making sure they are in the right hands is essential. And so I just have to say, I mean, please, if any of you are out there and you have any work that you have done, please call me. Make sure I know that Bruce has been gracious enough to make sure, Bruce Cornett, to make sure that his work will be going to a safe place with me, and I will do the right thing with that. But I mean, it is just so critical, because as we've seen with Mufon, I mean, they've got in Mufon headquarters the Len Stringfield files that are sitting there, you know, locked up, and they were, you know, I mean, 10 years ago at least, we're supposed to be archiving that and making that available to the public. But of course, I think we've seen a bigger push to sell T-shirts, you know, than we have to archive stuff. And even what happened with the Elaine Douglas files, I mean, that was a debacle, and you know, I truly feel that they needed to go sweep those up, because they knew that there was stuff in there that could really put a couple nails in that coffin. But we have to do our job, and so thank you for bringing that up. It's so important.
No problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're going to take a break, and I want to just thank everybody, Sue, Phil, all of you, for getting in here every week, for supporting the show. I love you guys. We're making a difference, and people are paying attention. And I also want to say, you know, with regard to, and Bruce had brought up the fact that you've got Robert Bigelow, who's now switched gears, and he's going back into the you know, life after death studies and yada yada. And I just have to say, what happened with the UFO studies? Because clearly there's never been a thing that he's put forward about that. So are we really going to follow him down another rabbit hole? I'm not, and I'll make sure none of us do. That's my thought. So anyway, I'm Erica Lukes here with my friends Tony and Ben. We are going to take a break. It'll be about a 3-minute break, and we will be back after that. All right, you guys, welcome back to UFO Classified. I'm your host, Erica Lukes. It is always wonderful to be here every Friday night, and I can have a completely terrible week, and I know that I get to spend Friday with you, and it makes the weekend so much better. I hope that you are all safe and sound. I want to give a shout out and a big love to Steve and all of the great people that get in here and ask important questions, and Peter and everybody. This is, to me, UFO Classified is a group effort, and we're all asking very intelligent questions. We want the truth. We understand disclosure is a farce, bought and paid for by who knows who, somebody that people, whatever. We could get into that, but we won't. I promised you, though, before when I opened the show, that I would read a little bit about some things that I found. And as I go through the 70 plus boxes of the Androphil files, the goodies that I pull out of there just leave my chin on the floor. And I'm quite certain that there are people in the UFO realm that are very, very unhappy that I actually have these files, because they know I have the fortitude to make sure things come out of this, and then I continue her work and get information out there. So I'm going to read this to you before we get back to Ben and Tony, and this is from SRI International. The date is August 17th, 1981, documentation report number 1. And it starts, as members of the Parapsychological Association are aware, the parapsychological community in general and SRI International's program in particular have come under increasingly harsh criticism from members of the committee with regard to the SRI program. Criticism by committee fellow James Randi has been exceptionally vocal with wide coverage in the popular media. Unfortunately, as the attached documentation shows, what is offered in the name of criticism is often totally false, since even professionals in the field can be confused by the misinformation with proper, since there is rarely an opportunity to set the record straight in a timely fashion with proper coverage. And given that it is too much of a burden to expect professionals to track down every rumor allegation, we propose to provide to members of the PA appropriate documentation by direct mail or handout. Since few of them have the time to digest en masse large amounts of documentation, we will follow the format begun here and providing the material of interest in a series of short installments that is signed Hal Putoff, Radio Physics Laboratory. And then there are about 5 more pages that I'm not going to read all of them, but let me just say, as I pull back each of these pages and I read them last night for the first time, I was very, it just kind of blew my mind, because then he talks about the 73 experimentation with Uri Geller, and as some people know, there were definitely allegations that Geller perhaps worked for a foreign intelligence agency, and then also more documentation of different people talking about this. Scott Rogo, there's a letter from Scott Rogo, who worked with Anne on a book, who was unfortunately and untimely murdered, and he was working, like I said, with Anne, and I'm going to read more of their work together in future episodes. And then finally there was a letter from December 28th of 1972 from Gerard Peel from Scientific America, and he starts out the first couple sentences: "For the past 10 years I've been engaged in research in the field of high-power lasers. At the same time I've been involved with cyclical research activity, and recently I joined Stanford Research Institute as a full-time researcher working with 2 apparently very gifted subjects, William Targ and I'm going to, again, like I said, this letter is really good. So for people that support the show, I will be sending these to you this week. Look forward to that, and I'll be talking about it a little bit more in depth. This is good stuff, I'm telling you. So anyway, on that note, I wanted to share that with you. I found it very exciting. I'm back with my friends Ben and Tony, who have just recently released a new book after years of research, the 1964, or not of this world, the 1964 Socorro UFO landing with humanoids. And so, guys, welcome back. I've had a fun first hour of the interview. We've talked about quite a bit of things, and I want to, before we get into your book, Your Time with Ray, which is really important, very interesting fellow, to say the least. People have very very strong opinions of him, but there is no doubt he's done some really cool things over the decades. He's been on my show, thanks to both of you, a couple times, and that was a great pleasure. But okay, disclosure in a nutshell. You kind of mentioned it in the first portion, but is that, what do you think about that? Do you just kind of chuckle like I do? Why?
There's absolutely no reason to disclose that there's, you go back to the Orson Welles broadcast and then the write-ups about how the public would freak out and couldn't handle it. The Orson Welles broadcast, War of the Worlds, that had people shooting their neighbors and setting their house on fire and fleeing the cities. But basically, you're not going to disclose an advanced technology is operating in defense airspace, and there's nothing you can do about it. And by the way, we're not really sure what it is or how it works, but everything's cool. That's just not a scenario I ever see happening.
And Tony, what do you think?
The same thing, pretty much. There's no reason for the government to admit that they've been lying to us all this time, and that they have any kind of technology and hard evidence that people are going to want to see. There's just too much. It's not a rabbit hole so much as it is a can of worms of rabbit holes.
Wow.
It's an enigma wrapped in a taco.
Exactly.
Dun, dun,
Deep
dun.
fry.
What do you think we really have pieces of crash saucers?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think there's evidence. I been looked at Roswell again extensively, and it just seems like the very first press release was the only accurate one they ever did, that a flying disc had crashed. Because there is material that has been analyzed that it turned into nanitol, which is the shape-shifting metal, but the properties of it are really strange. The pieces, the bismuth with the magnesium and zinc, the way it was made, to have found something like that in 47 on this micron thin level was just, the properties of it were fascinating. Block cosmic radiation.
Ben, speaking of hard evidence, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about the material Ray discovered in the book?
The material.
The rock. Dr. Hynek.
Good lead-in. Good lead-in, Tony.
Dr. Hynek.
Well, yeah, when Ray was at Socorro with Dr. Hynek and Lonnie Zamora, they were standing looking down at one of the landing impressions, and that's when Lonnie said that rock looked like it was broke by the landing gear. And Ray's looking at it, and Dr. Hynek goes, yeah, apparently so. And it looked like it had scraped down this rock. And then they didn't say anything, and then Ray just reminded them they had to go back to the police station for an interview. And they went back, and then Ray got in his car, came back, picked up the rock, and that rock ended up having some metallic debris in it that seemed to have strange properties, but that stuff was lost in the laboratory that he gave it to. So there's been a lot of cases where I think there's debris that, basically you're looking for, if it's an alloy like zinc or magnesium, the isotopes are going to be different if it's from another planet. So that's what you're looking for, is this different isotopic ratio. And I think they found that. I've seen good reports that they have found materials that don't seem to be made here. And the fact that we started working on this nanitol, something like that, but after 47, tells me that they were trying to study that. And the famous Canadian, I think it was Prime Minister or somebody with the Canadian government, said he looked into it and asked some people that were working on the materials in 1967, and they said, look, we've had this since 47, and we got about 3% of it figured out, but we have no idea what it is. that tells me that they have materials, but they still might be at the point where they're not sure how it works or what it's made of.
And the zinc metal alloy that was discovered that Frankel analyzed said that it was bound in a really strange way. They checked all the periodic tables.
Yeah, it didn't conform to any periodic table on the metallurgic chart.
And who was they?
It was the guy named
Goddard.
Dr. Frankel out at Goddard Space Center that tested the material and then kind of disappeared, and the material disappeared. They were only supposed to test half of it, and Ray, you got the rock back and it was scraped clean. But the rock still has some properties that are strange. It has melted crystal on it. And there's still evidence on the rock that it definitely got hit by this landing gear, and then maybe the blue flame played over it a little bit.
You know how you have something? It's when you don't get it back.
Yeah.
And when it's something, and also when pieces of metal that you find in Texas just go missing and never show up.
Well, I think lots of things like that happen in Texas, but that's another story. And so, I mean, and then you've got something like Art's Part.
Art's Part.
Yeah, never mind. It's another, Homo sapien kind of thing. But anyway, that's another story. So, I mean, Art's Part was sold to the highest bidder for quite a large sum, and it was kind of deemed to be,
the
nothing.
House piece for $30,000.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that piece, right?
Yeah. I remember. Right. I remember when that came out. Jeff Rentz had it all over his Rents.com in 2004. I was fascinated because Linda had said, the guy said, "Look, my grandfather was at the crash site. This is material from underneath of the crash, and they had these square metal things, but he also had some other pieces. It was a lot of pieces, and I was thinking, man, I'd like to get a hold of one of those. And now it's extremely valuable if it tests to be something very unusual."
Yeah, I don't think it did.
We had an opportunity. I don't know if you want to mention it, over at Colonel Hall's house to get a piece of that metal from that guy.
We did get a piece of metal from a gentleman from England that when we were at Colonel Halt's house a couple of years ago after, I guess we'd been at a conference or something. Or I think we just went over to visit him, but he gave us, there was this big hunk of what looked like slag that was supposedly from a UFO case, and we couldn't break a piece off, and so finally Colonel Hall had a saw, and we got a piece of this material. It looks like slag, which is just a normal byproduct of melting steel, but I still haven't had it tested because all this other stuff came up, and I don't want to let it out of my sight. I got to find somebody that will test it, but can't. I got to be there.
I hear Mufon has a great lab.
Yeah.
It should be facetious.
Sorry, I'm just being spicy tonight. What can I say?
Sorry.
Mom is in a spicy mood, and that's the thing. Where would you send it? And I mean, for me, I definitely wouldn't send it to anybody that had any ties with the UFO community. But it's just a thought.
That's a good question.
Yeah, you want to bring it to a lab and not tell them anything about it. That's the first step. You just don't, just say, hey, tell me what this is. Let me know its properties, what it's made of, and that's it. Mm-hmm. If they come back and go, this is really weird. Where'd you get this? It's got this, this, and this. Then you have something. But otherwise, it's tough. I think that with the pieces from Roswell, I've heard so many rumors about pieces, but the thing they had recently that was on the TV show was very interesting, that Jesse Marcel had hid pieces in his boiler, and they still might be there. And I couldn't believe they let that out on TV, that Jesse had hidden some pieces in a certain part of his boiler, and was going to show them to a friend when something happened. I can't remember. I think somebody else came over to the house, so they came out of the basement. He never got to see the pieces, but it seems like a lot of people snatched some pieces from that, and they're starting to turn up. So we'll see. I still believe Roswell was probably an ET crash. I mean, the evidence bends towards nothing else. Certainly not a mobile balloon.
Well, I mean, it is interesting because there have been, people like James Carrion and other people who have actually, they feel have been pretty, they've basically said that, this is why Roswell was just a cover-up. And there have been some pretty interesting things that have been, thrown out there, which have made me question that. And I've also really questioned Rendlesham. And a few months ago, I had Nick Redfern on the show, who had just released at that time a book about the Rendlesham Forest incident. And now he has found evidence to support the fact that this was actually just a test of sorts. And so how do you, you spent time with Colonel Halt, how do you feel about hearing something like that? And have you by chance read Nick's book on Rendlesham?
No, I haven't read it, but to be blunt, I would say I completely disagree, because I know Colonel Halt. He's a really honest guy. He had some of the highest clearances to investigate things after this incident, but the fact that what he describes on tape, the object splitting into 5 pieces, going in different directions, the radar operators just telling how fast this went across the screen, I don't buy that was an experiment. First of all, you would have to pull these guys out of Christmas parties, terrible time to do an experiment during a Christmas party, and drag them into the woods. It's kind of like when people say Socorro was a hoax that brought Lange, as if you could draw Lange to that site in the middle of nowhere in the desert. I think that Rendlesham was an unknown craft, probably not made by us, that landed in the woods, and then there may have been 2 or 3 other craft, because a lot of weird stuff happened. They had the laser going into the weapons storage unit. There were just too many witnesses, and plus Colonel Halt was there and was recording. A laser came down to the ground. I don't know of any flying craft we had in 84 or one of the 80 that you could shoot a laser down to the ground and then split into 5 pieces. We don't have anything like
I don't know. I think we've had technologies that have been pretty advanced for a long time, and that's the one thing, with looking into Skinwalker Ranch, and then looking into non-lethal weapons, and looking into some of the things that we've been. For a long, long time, we've had the capability to unleash. For me, it definitely raises some questions about that, and it's especially because Nick laid out the area is known for military experimentation. A lot of things have gone on over the decades and stuff, and I would love it if you could, and I'll send you the link. I want you to listen to the show with Nick, where he's talking about the research that he did, and it would be really, really, really cool if all 4 of us could do a show where we could kind of go back and forth and discuss some of these things. Because like I said, when I got into this, especially with Skinwalker, and you guys know how long, it's been years that I've really dug into this, and my whole world has been blown up by this, and I think that I just have to wonder now about some of these cases. So if you do that, that would be cool.
Sure. I just gosh, I lost my train of thought. What I was going to say about
Rendlesham?
Yeah, it just
I was going to say the physics don't add up.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like you were saying, from the laser to the technology of 1 turning to 5, coming back to 1. Just there's nothing at the time, and if it is our stuff, then prove it. But it seems to me like the evidence is more of otherworldly in that situation.
Yeah, there was a real kernel of a story there, but then you had all these pretenders come in, the Larry Warrens and stuff, that started making stuff up, and now people think a lot of different things happened that didn't really happen. But just listening to Colonel Halt's tape about what they're describing, that just doesn't sound like anything that could dart through the woods,
right,
and look like molten
trees.
Look like molten lead, and then split into 5 pieces.
He used to describe them as balls of plasma.
Yeah,
going around the trees.
And you can tell how astonished he is. And this is a guy that's seen just about everything that flies. And on the tape, he's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening." So we can, I'd love to listen to the show. Send us a link. I've always got an open mind if something else.
I would love that, because like I said, this is a discovery process for all of us, and the things. Oh, that I have learned of just, they've kind of blown my mind. And so I would love to have you listen to that, and I'll definitely send you a link and stuff, because I think it really raises a lot of questions for me about other cases that have been, promoted as ET craft, that I'm just sitting back and going, oh Lord, okay. Now my thoughts have changed, and I'm wondering how much of this was just kind of just put out there as like chum, in the water.
The way you got to look at it is, no matter how much you get into something, you always got to be ready to accept another truth if the evidence is there. No matter how hard it is. I mean, if someone proved to us that Socorro was this or that or the other thing completely opposite of what we thought, and they showed me enough proof, I'd have to accept it. Like the Billy Meyer thing, to find out that was all, big sham. That was difficult for a lot of people, I'm sure, because they wanted to believe it.
You had all the books.
I still do. They're expensive.
I was the one that told him it was all fake.
Erica,
did you get his little blanket and his pacifier out to make sure? I'm just kidding, Tony.
The books he has are worth a fortune.
They're worth a fortune.
Well,
that's why
they're gorgeous. I mean, I know. It is fascinating to look at some of those photos. Those are, something to have.
I even went as far as framing a couple of them. They're blown up, beautiful in color, And at the end of the day, for me, for wall art, I like it.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Cool. It's cool and kitschy, and there's a story to it, and it is fascinating. But Tony, you really hit it on the head. I think we all have to be open to. When we stand our ground, and like I was mentioning at the beginning of the show, it's like, certain people are going to stand on top of the hill and die on that cross. And it's like, okay, but we have to be willing, because we're dealing with something that has so many layers and so much disinformation, misinformation, delusion, all of this stuff attached to it, that we have to be smart enough to say, wait a minute, I'm sure we will be changing our mind as more information comes forward.
Well, that's what we did when we started looking into Socorro. We were going in to see if we could find out any other explanation for what happened there. And when we stripped away, we got new evidence, and the book is available on Kindle, by the way. But we got new evidence and more people that were actually spoke with Lonnie. We really realized there was, and the book is a good read because it gives you the evidence, and you can make your own decision. But I even kind of sum it up at the end, the 6 things it could have been: hallucination, a weather event, blah blah blah. But when you really look at the facts and you rule out the 2 things that a lot of people say it wasn't a balloon because it would have been impossible in that wind. And it wasn't the lunar lander because there were no flights that day, and it would have been 30 miles away from the base. And at that time, the lunar lander was only being dropped from a Bell helicopter to test the integrity of the struts. It wasn't burning an engine or having an engine test that day. It actually didn't fly until, I think, 3 months later in California. So when you look at the case and you strip it down, and then you have a witness who's probably the most perfect, honest guy that didn't want to have this event happen to him, there was no other explanation except that the craft was not of this world.
And so let's backtrack a little teeny bit, because there are some people that are coming into this and listening to the show that perhaps don't have a lot of background information on the 1964 Socorro case. And so give us a brief summary of the case.
So this was on April 24th, 1964, police officer Lange Zamora, he was just standing by, monitoring, and sees a speeder go by of a known young person who was known to drive through the town very quickly. So he goes after him, turns on his siren, and as soon as they get on the highway, heading out of town, he sees across his left side, crossing the road to his right, a flame and this loud roar, and he thinks it's an airplane crashing. And he saw it going in the direction of the dynamite shack, so he was concerned that maybe, there's going to be a big accident, an explosion. So he lets the speeder go off, and Lonnie has to turn his brand new police car, he's only had it about a week, off the road because he was concerned that someone's probably hurt and needs help, and he's, getting his car through some very rough terrain that we got to experience ourselves. In fact, when we were there, just a quick segue, we were trying to go on the exact path Lange went on, but it was really impossible. I mean, we would need like a 4x4 truck. And I'm sure that erosion over time has washed it down. So according to Ray, back in 1964, the hill that we saw was actually much higher, much steeper, because rain and weather erosion had brought it down quite a bit. The road that we actually did drive on was still really, really rough, and I think we might have damaged the suspension on our rental car. Anyways, back to Lange. So he's gunning his car up this hill, and he finally gets to the crest where he can see what came down, which, at a distance of about maybe 300 feet away.
Into the it was a depression. It's an arroyo.
They call it an arroyo. It's like a depression, so it's kind of hidden from everywhere else. So if you were gonna temporarily, park a vehicle like that, that's a perfect spot, because as soon as you land, you're hidden from two sides right away. The only thing they could see would be from above or in the channel of the arroyo. And so anyways, Lange sees that it looks like it could be like an upside down car or an upside down plane or something, and he sees these two figures in these white coveralls. And so he continues to move towards the craft, and he notices that the two creatures appeared shocked, like surprised that he was there. So as he gets as close as about 30 feet, we parked his car, and we parked our car in about the same spot Lange did to really kind of get a feel for the storyline and the timeline and what you could see and what you couldn't see. It was really important when we were there. I thought it was wonderful lining our car up like that. Anyways, Lange gets out of his car in time to hear something shut, like a door shut, like to a submarine, like a hatch, And so he probably got as close as maybe 15, 20 feet, and he saw this symbol on the side. It looks like an upside-down V with three lines through it, one above, one through the middle, and one below. And he says this in Spanish on the radio when he's radioing back. All of a sudden, a blue flame knifes into the ground.
It's an egg-shaped vehicle.
It's an egg-shaped vehicle. I thought for some reason we already said that. But it's an egg-shaped crab. It looks very much like an egg, ellipsoid. It had 4 legs. So a lot of people in a lot of stories you read, they'll say it had a tripod. No, it was actually 4.
Nick Redfern said that.
Yeah. Oh, did he? Yeah. Sorry, Nick. It's not your fault, Nick. They should have written it for you.
Should have written it better.
And then what's funny is that, if you apply logic to what you see in the book and the pictures and then the diagrams, the front of the craft was tilted down as if it was malfunctioning, because it didn't make any sense. The figures left behind footprints and 2 ladder prints, because
they were short.
They're very short. And so someone like me and Ben could basically pick our knee up and crawl into this hatch. But these little people, about 3 feet tall, because there was this creosote bush, or 4 feet tall, and they were standing next to a bush. So Officer Zamora could tell how tall they were based on the head height was on the bush. Anyways, when this blue flame knifes into the ground, this loud roar happens again, and this vehicle lifts off the ground, and as the knife blade of this blue flame comes down, it slices this bush in half. And this creosote bush requires a tremendous amount of heat in order to ignite. And it took literally a millisecond for the damage to occur to this plant. So the craft's now about 20, 30 feet in the air, and at the same time that the craft was taken off, Lange has to jump on the ground, prone, covering his face, as he was taught in the military. He was in the Army. And he looks up and he sees the craft. The sound is gone now. Instead of this loud roar, if you can imagine like a NASA rocket taking off, that to nothing.
Blue flame goes away.
Yeah. Do you ever watch what was it, Bugs Bunny, Martian, Martian?
Mm-hmm.
You never saw Looney Tunes?
Yeah.
Martian?
Yeah.
Oh, you said yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I thought you said no.
No, I did. Yeah, that was part of my growing up. So
in Marvin's Martian, do you remember when he lands on Mars, when he turns off his ship? That sound that it makes, like these turbines spinning down, like you know what I'm talking about?
Yep, that's okay. Good. I like your your impersonation there.
That's what Lonnie described when the engine was shut off, and it was completely silent, and it sounded just like that. And then it hovered for some time, I'm assuming maybe 20, 30 seconds. It starts to move near the dynamite shack, but not really the way it was described, because...
A couple of feet away.
Yeah. And so I don't think dynamite shack was really in danger, but... so this vehicle starts to accelerate, and as it's starting to reach hypersonic speeds, Officer Chavez is pulling up, because Lonnie was, communicating on the radio, and he's trying to get someone to come out there. And so as he pulls up, he actually sees this craft in the distance accelerate to hypersonic speeds and, change direction and just jettison into oblivion. And
that's the case.
That's pretty much the case right there. And like Ben mentioned earlier, when this craft landed, one of the feet, and it was shaped like a
wedge,
like a wedge, like a wedge point, and it cut this rock, and it left behind some material that was ultimately described as an excellent material, non-corrosive,
yeah,
for space travel, or something like that.
It was zinc, and it was normal material.
Zinc iron alloy.
It was said it was combined in a way that they couldn't recognize. They didn't know how it was put together at all.
And so a couple of the people in the chat room were saying that sounds like it could be human tech.
Now, you have a blue flame that wasn't a propellant, because Lonnie was 50 feet away. If that had been a rocket thruster, he would have been cooked.
He would have been dead.
And there would have been a big blast of sand and air and a scorch mark on the earth. That's not what this thing was. This was a very exotic blue flame that cut a creosote bush in half. That's a very resinous bush.
It was like a plasma discharge.
And definitely... and then when that cut off, you have what was estimated by the imprints as a 9-ton vehicle that was hovering in the air with no visible means of propulsion, then accelerated to what was later estimated as 720 miles per hour while knifing up into the air. In 1964, that's not our tech.
Okay, and that's interesting. And
it's not even our tech now.
Well, and that's interesting, and again, it'll be. I would love to get Nick on the show and to get a couple other people, because this. You guys have been, people are running this through the ringer, as we all should. So and things, and Bruce Cornett just said hydrogen plasma is blue. So I don't know. I mean, what? Yeah, I mean, it's just all so interesting, because.
Well, we have all the documentation about.
That's so cool.
There was nothing flying at the time.
That is so cool.
The Captain Holder was the uprange commander at White Sands. He knew if there was any, there were very few vertical takeoff vehicles. Mm-hmm. There's nothing that could mimic the physics of the way this craft moved, and the fact that Lonnie saw two creatures he said were 4 feet tall. And there were no footprints. There was nothing left around that indicated any type of human. There was no propellant found. If this was a regular propellant-driven engine, there would have been materials that they would have found that showed it was a regular combustion engine. That never happened. There was nothing. The Blue Book investigated the FBI, the White House. We have all this documentation. The White House was trying to get an answer. Hynek couldn't give him an answer.
Hector Quintanilla was obsessed with this.
Yeah, Hector Quintanilla in his book said that was the one case that drove him nuts, because he couldn't find an answer, and he got a top secret clearance to go to all the bases. He said, I'm going to find this thing sitting in a hangar, and he never did. And it's also the case that pushed Dr. Hynek into probably, saying, screw this, and he formed KUFOS.
So what do you think of Hynek?
Hynek was kind of like the Nutty Professor. He was brilliant, but he also needed someone to kind of chase behind him to help him remember things and help him,
Character.
Yeah, he was, kind of like a character. Yeah.
He knew his stuff. I mean, he was definitely a very smart guy, an astronomer that was on Project Blue Book. But, it's funny how he eventually had to realize after the Michigan swamp gas fiasco that he just couldn't make up any good excuses for what he was witnessing. He kind of came around, and Socorro was a seminal event because he really believed that Lonnie was telling the truth, And when you have the Joint Chief of Staffs and all the defense CIA also looking into this case, and they don't find an answer, then you know it's not a black project. It's not a man-made or human-made type of vehicle.
Interesting. And I mean, Hynek is one of those people that, again, like when I first got involved in this, you see this person and you think, here's this god, UFO god. He was pushing the boundaries and doing all of these things, and it's been very, I do
too. It was a lot of fun.
The TV show was great. I was so sad when I heard it got canceled.
It was entertaining.
It was definitely entertaining. There was lots of fodder going around about that, and some of the, I thought it was entertaining as well, but definitely not super factual for sure. But
no, not at all. But
it was entertaining.
Watching it.
But
the thing about Dr. Hynek is it was good to have had him in that position, because if you'd had a diehard, I'm sticking, to the what my bosses tell me type person, we would have never found out about a lot of these cases. He would have written all of them off and called them hoaxes or Venus or the usual explanations. And so it was good that a guy like Dr. Hynek, who was smart and was starting to figure out that, hey, maybe there is something going on because I can't figure out what we're looking at here. It was good to have him there. He did. He's
one of the. You don't get that kind of integrity anymore.
Yeah, definitely.
To him, it was more important to speak the truth than
after lying for a while.
After lying for a while. But he finally came around. He realized, that he had to do what he had to do.
It's kind of like, when people talk about there's nothing to it, and then if they have an encounter, they see one, then their whole mindset changes. You have to experience it before you can really know what you're talking about. And so for people to dismiss a lot of the, like, I believe Travis Walton pretty much happened as he says it did. There's actually evidence of that. But some people just intrinsically believe that first either it happened or you believe they believe it happened. So it's interesting that after all this time we're still scrambling for a lot of evidence, which is probably just sitting in hands that'll never let it go.
Every time I feel like we get close to holding evidence, something goes wrong.
Yeah, something happens.
Well, and I mean, it's interesting. I'm holding a lot of evidence in my hand because I've got a folder here of correspondence with J. Allen Hynek. Between different people and things, this is all original documentation, and it's like I've spent so much time going through this, and it certainly creates a much different narrative than I first would have thought when I started getting into this subject and thinking that Hynek was a UFO god or whatever icon. And I mean, I definitely, he did do some very important things, but what was the motivation behind that at the end of the day? And that's what I'm trying to weed through. And like I said, if you guys could see what was in my hands, it would be amazing. I hope to get that out there pretty quickly. But
you have 70 boxes?
Yeah, 70 plus.
How do you go through 70 boxes?
One at a time.
You know what? My brain just works in one of those ways, and I just get in there, and it's like just like a freight train.
You take a box to bed every night?
You know what? I lay everything out, and I'll go through each drawer, and I'll say, okay, today I want this, and this because of the way my brain processes things, and then I'll bring it home and start putting together a really nice kind of broad overview of some of these people, some of the organizations. You've got different people at UCLA or different people at Stanford or places like that, and different people like Michael Swords and QFOS and lots of correspondence at QFOS and APRO and NICAP, and it's been absolutely fascinating. And I feel so fortunate that I have this collection. Because I really feel at the end of the day, this having that gift of me being able to continue her work is going to help all of us. It is so cool. And when, everything kind of dies down, you'll have to come out and go through everything.
Sure. We look forward. We did it. We kind of rummaged with Dave Marler at his place.
Man, that was a great time.
Yeah.
Dave Marler is a great host.
He is exceptional in that regard, and I keep trying to reach out to him. I hope that at some point in time he can come on the show, and then we'll see. I would love to know, because they're obviously just announced that they're, all the QFOS files and different things are going to Marler, and that there was a considerable donation. I'd love to know who the donor was. I think that would be something that probably would be worthy of public attention. Wink, wink. And I also would love to know, how, if a researcher wants to have access to these materials, how they could go about that. Because again, my concern is we've got we've got a group of people that are really doing amazing work, but how is that information going to be disseminated to the public? And what is the criteria for getting information out? I mean, what standards do they have? Are they looking at specific people and denying access to things, or what are the protocols? And I think that
hopefully
they talk about that.
Everything,
Yeah, no, Dave's donating his to a university for public, for public.
And he was in the process of digitizing, him and his friends and his group.
Anybody that talks to him, he'll invite you out to look at his stuff.
Well, I know, I've been there. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's the preservation. I know a gentleman, Isaac Coy, on Facebook from Great Britain, I think. He's been digitizing a ton of old UFO magazines, and Jim Mosley's, remember Saucer Smear and all these things we used to read years ago.
I think a lot of that work has actually been done by Barry Greenwood, and so, I mean, Barry's been such a saint at digitizing all of this, and then I think, from my understanding, Isaac gets, that there's a coordination between different people, and Isaac, I don't know how he can do all of this being a barrister for the Queen's Court. He must have some free time.
Well, he always gets permission. He's asked me for things from Ray, and I've put him in touch. But he just wants to get it out in the public, so he gives you the link to everything. But some of these magazines I can barely remember, and there were a lot of UFO magazines in the UK that we never saw over here. A lot of cool stuff. Sometimes you can see something that relates to a case you know about, and you go, "Wow, I've never seen this picture or heard this story before."
Especially, I like reading stories from UFO encounters in Italy.
Yeah.
And because, it's like you keep thinking all the time that, it only happens in America. Then all of a sudden you realize there's a whole other world over there.
Yeah.
And they have some really great stories.
It is great, and it has been interesting to see all of the hard work that a lot of different people have put forth to get information out and to preserve some of these periodicals and things. That is really cool, and I know that Coy has done a great deal of work in that regard. So, but it is interesting to me, and I do have, it is, how do we get this information out, and what are the protocols? How do we discern who we're giving information out to, or should we? Yada yada yada, and who is behind. Who has got the purse? Who's pulling the purse strings?
Yeah, you never know. I mean, hopefully we'll get to like a universal UFO database library where, everybody can put the content into one big cloud storage application, and that way it's accessible to everyone. It's kind of like with the Roswell slide fiasco where, you were invited to this event that turned into a disaster to witness the unveiling of the slide that turned out to be a mummified child. And
people put their names on that.
The thing is, I was the first one to announce it. I was at the Maryland UFO conference with, what's his name? Don Schmidt and his buddy...
Tom.
Yeah.
Tom Carey.
Tom Carey. And Tom Carey announced, while they were sitting on the panel, that they have a photograph. And I put it on Facebook, and that's when the news broke. And I found out it had been rumored earlier about this photograph found underneath his desk. But I tweeted I put it on Facebook, and then it kind of shot around the world because we recorded that also, and I put the recording out there. And I told Tom later, I said, man, if you just let us have a look at the photograph, we could have saved you a lot of time. But it's just one of those things where, you jump the gun too fast when you think you have something. You better do your homework first.
Well, and it also goes to show that there is a concerted effort to rip you a new one if you don't. Which, I mean, with that whole thing, there were some pretty despicable characters that came up for those, and I, in my opinion, were pretty unethical with the way they dealt with things. But that's another story. But I wanted.
Mufon brought in $1 million.
I know it generated over $1 million, and 70% of the people couldn't access it on the internet. I don't think. So.
Are you sure about that, though?
I heard they raised a lot of money.
But I think a lot of the seats were empty. I mean, there were some discrepancies in that, and that's again. Well, I might have to revisit that. I think I've gone through enough counseling that maybe I can do that, because I don't know if you remember. I had the gracious honor, thanks to Steve Hudgens, of doing the Mufon radio show where I was interviewing Jaime, and right around that time, and that's a whole nother story. So we'll have to if I could find the fortitude, I'll have to do a show on that. But I want to ask you, because we're kind of getting ready to close up the show, but what were some of the things that you found out while you were researching your book that really kind of blew your mind?
Well, we got the impression, and Ray will tend to disagree a little bit, but we got the impression that Lange had gotten a lot closer to these creatures than he let on. And that when he, as a devout Catholic, when he realized they weren't human, he did go to his priest for like 2 hours that night, because he thought he had seen, I think, demons. And his priest told him, that one of his good friends told me that his priest had told him that you can either stop talking about it or always tell the truth about what happened. And Lonnie decided to tell the truth. But I think that, he changed completely. We talked to his daughter and interviewed his daughter, and she said it was just never the same. And you could tell that something like world-shattering had happened to him. And that was one thing that really hadn't come out before. And then a couple of people that knew him that just would say, you didn't bring it up, but sometimes out of the blue he'd start talking about it. And, towards the end of his life, he said he would call them those creatures and say that they weren't from around here, and I don't care if you believe me or not, but he was sorry he ever told about it. And, it's just one of those things where the witness was almost the perfect guy for it, because he was a good observer. He had a lot of detail. He remembered a lot, and they interviewed him right after the event. Holder was on him with the FBI agent who said, please don't tell anybody the FBI is here. But just a fascinating case, and a perfect witness to see that it just wasn't, nothing about it says human to me.
Ever since we started this case, I always felt that this craft was disabled or something was wrong with it. They had an emergency landing, which is why the front of it was tilted down. And when
almost hit a car of tourists.
That's right. It's in the book. But when it was coming to land, it almost took the antenna off a tourist, a car of 4 people, 2 kids and parents going to the gas station, and they talked to the attendant there saying, man, you guys got some crazy helicopters around here, almost took our antenna off, or some low-flying crazy-looking vehicles or whatever, yeah. And so then what happened, this thing had something wrong with it. And what we discovered from talking to some of the people that knew Lonnie, they said that they had heard that things were falling from it, and they had discovered something that looked like a credit card-sized circuitry or something. And I just thought that was interesting, because what if this thing was malfunctioning and parts of it, we didn't have circuit boards yet, and they're just what they were describing, something the size of like a credit card, what have you, that looks like a map with little solder boards.
There was a report that something was dropped. Some kids found it. It was the engineers, a lot of engineers in Socorro were looking at it. It was really advanced circuitry. And then when I talked to James Fox while he was working on his film Phenomena, he had come to the same story by a totally different route. I'm like, really? You heard that from? He heard it from a different source, and so it was interesting that I'd never heard this before. And the rumor was that maybe Lonnie, had kept a piece in his house, and then his daughter told me, unfortunately, that his house got robbed after he had passed, but it was robbed in like 2016 or 2017. So another possible piece of extraterrestrial craft that mysteriously just never shows up.
Why? I mean, if I were going to, well, I mean, not that I would, but if I were robbing somebody's house, that would probably be the last thing I'd be looking for.
Unless you were specifically looking for that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, intelligence agencies,
Right.
Figures out they're starting to put something together and they know exactly what they're looking for. It's
We're
just like with
we're
Roswell when they
yeah.
threaten people, if you showed a piece in a bar, they were on you like flies on stink right away to give up the piece. And if you've got any more and you're hiding it, you're going to be in big trouble.
It was really interesting, too. This is a little tidbit I'll throw out there, but apparently Bigelow had a person that Gary Hernandez, who he'd kind of paid to be a man in black and kind of go out and find people who had sightings in specific areas and then allegedly intimidate them to give up their film, whatever they had on whatever they saw. Just I thought I'd throw that in there. And so I have to ask you about Ray, because Ray is such a colorful man. He's had such an interesting life, and I really, I wish I could have the opportunity to go to his home and see some of the amazing things that he has there. But what were your thoughts? I mean, how was he to deal with? What are your thoughts on him? And have there been? I mean, I know he told on my radio show a story about Hal Puthoff coming in. Can you talk a little bit about Ray and then maybe about that experience with Puthoff?
Ray's had a lot of interesting visitors. He has a lot of engineers and aerospace guys that look at his stuff. The Hal Puthoff story is not nearly as interesting as the Uri Geller story.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah. Okay. Do tell.
Tell them the Uri Geller story.
Yeah, him and Uri Geller were close friends back in the day, and Uri and Shippy were touring around, and they knew that Ray had some psychic abilities, and for some reason, when Uri and Shippy were around Ray, it's like the three of them formed some sort of like triangular energy thing or whatever, and some really weird things happened to Ray. He was going to travel some 300 miles somewhere, and Uri said that he was going to teleport him, and
they had an accident.
Well, that was the second time he was teleported. He was almost got in this car accident. This all went to court, believe it or not, because he was driving down the highway. There was this truck in front of him, like an 18-wheeler that's hauling like metal railings, like I-beams, and it jackknifed. And Ray hit the brakes, and he looks out his driver's side window, and he sees this I-beam about to go right through his door. He closes his eyes, prepares for impact, and then he opens his eyes, and he looks, and there's no truck there. He looks to his right window, and the truck's on the right. So his car somehow went through this whole truck and came out the other end. And his end of the door was so smashed because the impact of the I-beam had already started to take place that Ray had to climb out the right side of the car, and he was bleeding from the head. So he had taken some impact, but that should have killed him. What's really interesting is the woman that was driving behind Ray saw the whole thing happen.
Testifying in court that the car disappeared and appeared somewhere else.
Yeah, and they were so baffled in court that they had to just dismiss the whole thing. I do.
Well, that would be cool to see the documentation. Definitely. I would love to see that. It's always interesting when people like Puthoff and Geller and co get involved with that. And I mean, what are Ray's thoughts on things now? When's the last time that you talked to him?
I talked to him on Christmas.
I talked to him recently. He's working on his own presentation materials for his research, but he's had some weird things fly over his house. He had some object with yellow lights come down near his house once, and I was looking up. There's almost nothing that flies that uses just amber lights. I was thinking it didn't act like a drone. Helicopters don't use just amber. They have to have specific lights in specific positions. But it was really weird. Ray was like hiding behind a tree. This was at night, trying to figure out what it was, and it wasn't making any noise whatsoever. It was just popping in and out, and he
has a magnetometer that he uses every now and then still, and that's gone off a few times.
He has a huge magnetometer, and when that thing goes off, it means there's something just disrupting the magnetic field that's usually flying.
And he's got it tuned for specifically
10 hertz or something. But he lives near a famous place that shoots rockets up too, so he probably catches a few of those things going off.
Right.
Ray has a lot of evidence of things that are just amazing, and hopefully one day it'll see the light of day.
It's fascinating because he's an interesting guy, and there are a lot of people, like I mentioned. I mean, people have very strong opinions about him because he just doesn't take a lot of crap. I mean, he
does not take any crap, and he does not care what you think about him.
Ray has so many interesting stories. I mean, the guy
I like to see
speaks like 5 languages and has visited all. He used to make rockets when he was younger. He was supposed to be a rocket scientist, and Ray has done some amazing things, and all the people in ufology, from Adamski to a lot of the hoaxers, he knew all of them. He knew Phil Klass.
Phil Klass tried to kill him.
Phil Klass tried to kill him.
What?
Ray was invited on a boat trip with Phil Klass, and at the last minute he said he wanted to bring his son along, and then Phil canceled the trip. And Ray kind of jokingly says that he thinks he was going to push him off the boat.
You know what? Now that you say that, I remember him talking about that on my show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Phil did come to his house and looked at some of his evidence and told Ray, he says, I think you've got something here, but I would never publicly say that. So, there are a lot of people that have seen Ray's material and come away. I don't know anybody that comes away and says there's nothing there.
I think our next book is going to be called Ray Stanford.
The Stanford Chronicles.
The Stanford Chronicles, yeah. We were throwing that title around.
Well, that'd be interesting. He's very, very colorful, and it would be interesting to know some of a little bit more background about him. What his, political, religious, what his thoughts are on that. Because I find it interesting to see how people, like Lonnie Zamora, when he's seeing these beings, he's thinking that they're demonic, and a lot of people in the UFO subject equate things to demons, or they'll, or ET, or different things. We all place our different belief systems on some of these experiences.
That's true. I mean, I hear people associate, demonic type of, association with some of this stuff. But in my opinion, I feel like they just don't understand what it could possibly be in terms of extraterrestrial.
Yeah, I usually don't say something's ET, but, you have to look at, if, like with Socorro, if it wasn't made by any country on this planet, then it could be interdimensional, it could be from another universe, but it's still extraterrestrial. It's not a terrestrial object. So by ET, you don't mean grays flying around or reptilians. We just mean some other civilization has some craft that come into contact with us, but who knows where it's from? Anybody that says they know where it's from is just making stuff up.
Right.
And that's the thing. I think that's an important point. It's like I can't say at the end of the day that this is, Grandma Moses, E.T., whatever it is. I mean, none of us know, and I think it's really ridiculous for us to say that this is. How can we put things in a box? And I think that's a big trap that we kind of step into as people looking into this very interesting subject.
Yes, for sure.
That's fascinating. So we've got to end the show. I could talk to you guys for, half of me is like, okay, let's keep going. But I know it's Friday night. You boys have to go have some fun and things. And so where can people find your book?
It's on Kindle under
on Amazon.
Amazon Kindle, Not of This World.
Or just type Ben Moss, it'll pop up.
Or Night of This World on Kindle, it'll pop up. Or you can, for a hard copy, you can email me at bmoss and the number 6 at verizon.net. I'll send you a signed copy. So the book is pretty comprehensive. I think we covered the case pretty clearly. So once you read it, make your own determination. But I couldn't come up with anything other than just not human.
And that would be great. I mean, I definitely encourage, people to read the book. And then I've got so many wonderful listeners that are asking great questions, and I'd love to get their opinions about the book and then have you guys come back on, because I'd like to also really kind of dive into some of the other experiences that Ray has had, and also there was a great question in chat about the other sightings that took place in the area during the same time frame. And so so many other things to talk about and get to, but thank you both very much for hanging with me tonight. It's always a great pleasure and a lot of fun to talk to both of you, so thank you very much.
I can answer that question. There's a whole chapter about all the other egg-shaped sightings during that time frame. So I found a plethora of egg-shaped sightings that occurred during that time frame in and around the area. It's all in the book.
Cool. Well, all right. We're going to have to just talk about all of that at a future date. So you guys take care of yourself. We'll pray that we can get together and hang out soon. And I want to just thank everybody for getting into chat, for listening to the show. I appreciate you very much, and I'm so grateful to spend Friday evenings with you, because this really is one of the highlights of my week. I look forward to sharing more information out, and if you support the show and help keep me on the air and also help the archiving process, then I will be sharing more documents with you. And I read some of the documents from Hal Putoff and things this week, but I will be sharing that with the people who help keep me on the air and keep helping promote truth in all of this. So thank you all very much. Thanks, Ben and Tony. You guys have a great and fun and safe weekend, and we will catch you all next week.
Ditto.
So my skeptical mind, and that's just who I am. My skeptical mind goes to, well, yeah, of course, you've got this guy over here that's logical and reasonable, and you got this guy over here that's wearing a tinfoil hat. Of course, the tinfoil hat guy's gonna see a lot of stuff, right? He's like imagining it, or he's watched one too many sci-fi movies.
But it can be used to help us frame hypotheses for UFO propulsion, power, stealth, weaponry.
Everything that we experience is very positive.
Sometimes the field of ufology has a short memory span.
We didn't know anything about the $22 million back then. We just kind of thought, well, this is, and I think that was the reason why they were looking for military-type people, because in the military, you work with whatever you got, no matter what the situation is, and you just kind of adapt and overcome.
What are you going to do with all this? You can't even take care of your own files and get them put into the current system, but yet you want to go collect other people's things. So what are you going to do with it? Who are you giving all this to?
It just really struck me about how the common thread seemed to be deception, but deception of a human nature. So that's what I started thinking, who would these folks be? I mean, then I started thinking about the intelligence agencies, what role they could play, and what would be their motivations for getting involved in ufology.
I'm not saying that because the gimbal is not a rotating flying saucer, that means that all the UFOs are false. Not at all. All I'm doing is I'm looking at this one case, these individual cases, and seeing if there's an explanation for those. So try to, if I could ask people out there listening, don't think that I'm trying to attack your entire beliefs about these things.
Nice to be in orbit.